Welcome to the first video we've ever done of a product review from the new Speedy Feet warehouse. We're actually stood in the staging area of the showroom at the moment where this will display unicycles, etc. So you're getting a little bit of a sneak peek of our street scene that we've got going on. Anyway, today reviewing the much anticipated InMotion V14. Now this, by all accounts, should be a bit of a torque beast. So the motor is a 4,000 watt motor. Things are getting crazy from the years ago when we first started, when we started with a 500 watt motor back in about 2013, 2014, to think now this is 4,000 watt with a peak output of 9,000, but 4,000 watt motor linked up with 2,400 watt hours of battery power. So it should be good on paper. So we're taking it out to test. It's got the off-road tyre on it, which is what this ring's really set up for, because obviously you've got the suspension, you've got the grippy foot plates, grippy tyre, and a 16-inch wheel, so motor. So this should be spot on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out and see what it rides like, get used to it. I always say the golden rule is take it out, do like 50 miles on a wheel before you make a decision about whether you do or do not like it, etc. I took a brief step in this a second ago, just before I put it on this turntable, and bounced up and down suspension. It felt smooth as. So you've got a Mudguard, which runs through. Any of you are familiar with other wheels, something like, a bit like the S22, S18, S19, it's got that very close Mudguard that runs all the way through from top to bottom. So just stand this up. So it's got a built-in stand. That's the first thing to note. Be interested to see if that gets knocked on anything, etc., etc. Suspension travel really nice. Comes with side reflectors. This is interesting on a turntable. Let me turn it on and then power it up. There we go. So you're actually getting a good view of this. It's getting spun around as I stand here. Day running light, fairly obvious. Touch screen, not on this one. This is a standard screen, which I don't know. Maybe more convenient, not sure. You've got to use the app to change stuff, but you can't get any false presses or anything like that if you've got gloves on, etc. The other one did work on the V13, so the screens you see on the V12, high torque, high speed, and also the V13 had a touchscreen, which they also made a watch, like a smartwatch at one point. I think they probably still do it. I've never ever got them in, which essentially looked the same as the screen did. But this, nope, that's all gone. In exchange for more of a direct approach with their screen. Modify it with the app, etc., etc. Trolley handle in the center, push button, like almost all trolley handles. Just push the button in, extend it up. It has got charge port with a rubber flap on the very, very top. Quite fiddly to get that out, but you can. Just a bit of, could probably struggle with gloves on to do that. But one good thing about that, of course, it's better sealed. So water ingress, etc., very reduced essentially on that one, but it will charge up to 16 amp, so that's pretty impressive. And it comes with a 3 amp charger, but it's got 2 ports. Other chargers, don't mix and match, that's not recommended, but if you've got, I don't know, like a 10 amp charger, it's gonna eat that, no problem at all. So suspension at the back, so you've got your adjustments here and here, so plenty of adjustments there. Metal frame around that obviously, but the Mudguard has got a flexibility to it, which I quite like. So we're going to test out and see how this goes. One other important thing actually to mention is that Velcro. So where you want these is where you slap them on. So no double-sided sticky tape. I'll put them there, you put them there. How this Velcro will hold up, I am not sure. I can kind of imagine laying that down in the mud a few times, it's going to get packed up. But it's nothing unusual, it's nothing bespoke to this. That is quite a common way of doing it nowadays. So yeah, lights on the back. You see that red light there. There's the light there, blind you. So I'm going to test all these features out. Probably not talk much more about it. We've got grippy pads, we've got adjustable side pads for super extra torque. Push button, turn on and off. Lights, straightforward. Press it once, short press. Lights coming off, nice bright and high up rear light. Side reflectors, just stickers basically, but side reflectors nonetheless, which is definitely going to help with that traffic that might potentially pull out and smash into the side of you. This is solid stand If I just turn this off now, you'll see that, just put it down like that, and it's stable, really stable. So one other thing I do like is you've got battery protection at the bottom here. So this actually will protect from knocks and things. It's like a little bumper, essentially. So lifting it. Oh dear. Says 39 kilograms is what it weighs, which I'm currently riding again the V14, which is 50. I put it on and found that actually it's not 39, it's 41. That's the figure I got anyway, so maybe that's because with the addition of the side pads or something. It's not the heaviest wheel, but it's also not the lightest, but it's got a lot going on. So the big batteries, everything like that, you know, you've got to account for that. You've got suspension, batteries, very powerful motor, a lot of winding in there, etc., etc. So all this adds weight, but it is, I have to say, pretty compact for what it is. So I'll take this out, test it. One thing is the charger is here. That is the 3 amp charger. So 100, almost unbelievably, in 134.4 volts. This wheel's running out. So it's a lot of voltage going through the motor, which is pretty sweet. Again, back in the day, 55 volts used to run through the motors. So motors increased. Everything's getting maxed out. But the build quality of this just feels, it just feels lovely. I think it looks really good. I mean, obviously that's subjective, but in terms of build quality, it feels really well put together. If the direction of electric unicycles went this way, you know, in quality of assembly, that goes a long way really to saying, you know, it's official, proper product rather than a bit DIY-ish, which you see in some of the other brands. But yes, let's take it out, see how it actually rides, because that's the important thing. See what the pros, cons are, and get my feedback really after riding all these years and coming off a V13, which obviously suspension wheel. If you don't know what a V13 is, go and look at our review on that. But essentially, I'm jumping off that onto this, so I'm used to the heavier wheel. So this will probably feel quite nimble to me. For some people upgrading from smaller wheels, starter wheels, etc., you're probably going to find this is quite big and heavy and you won't be used to it. But again, it's that riding it for a period of time, so you get to feel what a wheel's like, truly like, not just first impressions, because don't really help first impressions, to be fair. So yeah, I'm going to go and get kitted up and take it off out into the forest. First of all, that's where this thing is supposed to shine. So I'll try. Well, I am back from my initial impressions and also the range test, which I'll get onto in a second. First impressions of this wheel, as soon as I got on it, as I say again, I've come in from the V13 to this V14. Two different beasts, similar in numbers, but different beasts. The suspension on this is like a magic carpet. It is absolutely beautiful to ride. Huge amounts of torque, absolutely incredible. So blown me away a little bit just by how that power delivery comes out of this, say little wheel, little-ish in comparison to a V13, but the 16-inch, just incredible really. The tyre has been exceptional in terms of grip, etc. On the road, I tried to sort of swerve it left and right as strong as I could, like carving as some people call it. It's noisy, as it's always going to be with a knobbly tyre, but I did not lose traction at all. And took it up to close to its top speed and handled absolutely fine. And off-road, it just digs in, it grips, and you've got the knobbles right out across the whole of the tyre basically. So you can lean in pretty sharp even off-road and it will dig in. One feature I do like is the headlight. So V11 and the V13, well, let's go back, shall we? The V5, V8, V10, V11, V12, V13 all have fixed headlights. This one has little adjusters, so out the box, didn't do anything with it, and you can tilt it up and down. So when I was going back late in the evening, was able to tilt that light wherever I wanted. So when we were going up steep hills off-road, the main problem being is it points straight at the ground. So if you can imagine you're going uphill and it's keeping the wheel level, the light's hitting here. And so I was able to just adjust it up, just lean down, pull the light up and shine it uphill. And then not to blind traffic once we hit the roads again, just put it down again. So it's pretty sweet. The other thing I like is it's got a dead straight line across the top of its beam. So where the arc of the beam is, not like an orb, like most lights are, it's actually got a line. And that's quite a good indicator to know where you're at in terms of camber. So I quite like that. It's an interesting shape, hard to film, but nonetheless, it's on a bracket with adjuster bolts on it. Out of the box, you just tilt it whichever direction you want it, really. And so from that point of view, that's quite neat. I mean, I think the next thing, as I've always been advocating, is like a roller wheel in one hand that controls the light unit, or even a switch, A and B, and you set that up within the app or something. And so you've got two different modes. But a scroller wheel will be quite nice, so a motorised up and down, a rapid up and down, so you can do adjustments on the fly without having to lean down. Of course, you can get around all that by putting a couple of lights on your helmet, whatever, and then where you're looking is where it's bright. So it depends how you roll, really, but inbuilt headlight, really, really bright, yeah, spot on. And now the turntable's timed out. But the good thing about this, of course, as well, is the side pads. You've got the lower ones, so you can tuck these down depending on what you want to do with this. If you want to do jumping, etc., we used to call them cheek pads. You put these nice and low, they sit against your foot. And essentially, if you hold yourself in completely firmly, you can just lift the thing up by jumping, compress and jump. Go and look at a very, very old video I did some time ago about jumping, and that was pre-suspension, pre-side pads, etc. But the concepts are all exactly the same. You load up the suspension and you go with it and lift it up. But these help massively. And the Velcro on the sides, for positioning, when you first get on the wheel and setting them all out, has been spot on. And so I've been able to put these exactly where I want them. If you're a new rider and this is your first wheel, just when you're setting these up, make sure they're equal. So you need to get them the same each side. Otherwise, you're going to have a bit of weird, put more power down on one side. You sort of introduce a bit of a twist, which can then cause wobbles, especially at speed and stuff, especially the heavy braking, when you're likely to find out you suddenly lean back sharp, and you lean back and your legs aren't quite leaning back equally, so you offset that weight slightly to one side, inducing a wobble. So make sure, good rule would be equal both sides. The lower ones, again, for jumping. So if you really want to lift this machine, put them in nice and tight to your toes, essentially is where it's more or less at. The front part of your foot is a good position for that. But the pads, plenty of beef on here, so sticking out enough. They're not thin where you can't really grip into it. My whole shin can lean into this, and my calf muscle for braking can lean to the back. Spot on. In terms of foot plates, we've had this question asked a few times by customers ringing in asking about this wheel. Is, do I need to upgrade them? My advice always is, don't bother. Ride the wheel as it is and see how you go. If you feel you need to, then spend the money. But otherwise, you might find they're actually adequate and you regret spending a load of money on foot plates that you didn't necessarily need. Now, I went out into some very muddy and wet conditions, and these remained grippy throughout. So I personally wouldn't upgrade. I like them as they are. They're absolutely fine for my riding. Mudguard does fairly well, does a good job, depending on how much you push it. So if you really throw this thing at a load of mud, which, as with all wheels, anything like sand, mud, water, you're just reducing the lifespan of your wheel. So just keep that in mind whenever you risk your investment. But if you go through some thick mud like I've been doing, with a lot of water, it will splash up and around this Mudguard. I didn't get any on my clothing, but the wheel is more dirty than I'd have expected if the Mudguard, covered all splashes. So I've got mud at the front, got mud down the back, but not up my back, which is the important thing. So no mud on the rider, which is a big thumbs up, but your wheel might need cleaning down if you're doing that sort of riding. In terms of the actual protection front and back, I haven't had to test that because I haven't come off it. But we shall report back if I do have an off, which is rare, but if I do have an off, then I'll let you know how all that holds up. In terms, so I've touched on it briefly, but in terms of its acceleration and its braking is incredibly strong. So that peak power output of this motor I mentioned earlier, and it's just, yeah, it just stops really quick and it accelerates really quick. And so you've got it there. The screen on top, mentioned earlier, it's not a touch screen. That seems to be able to get scratched up fairly easy. So again, if you purchase one of these, speedyfeet.co.uk, if you purchase one of these, get some tape. You can buy 3M tape, which is like screen protector tape. Get that and put it on there if you want to retain its newness, because I think you're going to find that gets scratched up. So keep an eye on that. In terms of its stability at low speeds and high speeds, no issues at all. If you're a new rider or you're coming from a lot smaller wheel, you're going to find this quite big, but stick with it. Ride that 50 miles and get used to it. That's the benefit of sticking with something. You actually then start to get over those little new wheel issues, and you'll get used to it. But it's balanced really nicely. Now, days of old, you'd have some wheels where the battery packs are offset, so you'd have like two one side and one the other, and that causes a bit of instability, like I was talking about earlier, in terms of you positioning your legs under accelerating and braking. That doesn't happen on this. Everything's like perfectly centered, so it just rides really, really well. The ability to charge with two chargers is a massive bonus. I found it's about 6 hours from when I ran it down to, I think, 6%, 5 or 6%. So having a double charger obviously would reduce that time by half, which is far more reasonable. But even then, that would have only been at 6 amps if I got InMotion chargers times 2 standard chargers. When it's got capability of going up to 16 amp, according to the technical information. Now, I say that because I've not been able to test that to say, oh yeah, absolutely, definitely. So anyone has out there, comment below. That leads me now to the range. Now, what range did I get? Well, I had a total of enjoyable riding, shall we say, 27.5 miles down to 20%. So 27.5 miles of thrashing this thing down to 20%. At 35%, you start to get some beeps. At 20%, it starts to really then eat into your top speed. You know, you're starting to get noticeable. And I'm going to call the 20% and then down dog walking mode. So you've still got plenty of speed. You know, getting 20 miles an hour at that speed, but that's about where you're at. The beeps are annoying. If you want to keep under the beeps, it's around about that. It does vary, so it tails down as you go. So on average, it's about right. The lowest thing I got down where it's beeping was about 14 miles an hour. So I got 27.5 down to 20%, and then I got another 5.5 miles, and I stopped, I think it was 6% battery. So in total, this machine gave me 33 miles. It's probably capable of another mile, maybe another 2 miles at a lot slower speed. So 35 miles out of it. The fun, 27.5, and then it started to tail off. The interesting thing is, when I was at 20% and hit that barrier, yes, it's doing an alarm, but unusually, a lot of wheels will then limit power output. This wasn't limiting power output, sorry, at 35%. It wasn't limiting power output. So down to 20, it started to. So when it hit that 35% mark, and it's the first time I got the alarm, I was still able to push the wheel. And even when it got down to 20%, the torque wasn't limited. So I tried a few steep climbs from 20 down to that 10% mark, and it still had all that torque. So it wasn't lacking in the power. It would tilt back, though, in relation to speed. So as the speed got higher, it tilts you back. So it's a bit of nannying going on, sort of 20% down, definitely. It starts to rear its head at about 35. But 20% is really where it sort of bites in, and then you're going to be brought to a slower speed bit by bit by bit, right down to your 6%. As I said, I think 6%, I was doing about 15 miles an hour, and at that speed, at 15, it started beeping at you. 13, 14 miles an hour, it didn't. So that's approximately where we're at, just keeping a general eye on it. So I was actually quite pleased with the 27.5 miles I got out of it, because I have put on some weight since the last videos. Don't tell anyone. And so actually that's performed quite well, because I've probably put on like 2 stone since my last video. So yeah, 27.5 of fun. I enjoyed that. That's good. I was pleased with it. Remember, there's always caveats. If you're running a lower tire pressure, if you are heavier than me, if you're the same weight as me, you're carrying a backpack, if you're going up a mountain, all these things will vary. If it's freezing cold weather, you're going to get less. This was done at about 19 degrees Celsius. So there you go. You've got a bit of a benchmark. I'm about 15.5 stone. You can work that in kilograms. A bit of a game for you. Write in the comments below. And 19 degrees, 15 stone, 15.5 stone, with I think it's about 35 psi in here. That's the sort of mileage you're probably going to get. So I was well pleased with that. The fact that it allows you to have that torque was a big bonus to me. As soon as I heard the beep, I was like, oh, great. So now I won't be able to enjoy these steep climbs and stuff. But to my surprise, for example, I get basically full power output and no beeping, because I wasn't hitting those on tough, steep trails. I wasn't hitting the top speeds. And so in other models, you'd hear the beeping all the flipping time based on power output, but it was still giving me the power. It was just warning me when I was getting fast that, by the way, your battery is low. Now, on one hand, that's a really good thing, because that's going to save you a severe accident. If you carry on pushing these wheels when they got low batteries, is when unexpected things happen. Secondly, I kind of want to make that decision myself, and maybe I'd like to see it around, don't do anything until you get to the 20% or even 15%, because there's hardly a tiny battery in here. So yeah, from that point of view, I think it's probably over nannying. But there again, I reflect, and I think I got 27.5 of fun. So you can all have your own opinions. I really enjoyed this. This wheel has been brilliant fun, and I'm going to continue on with this now. I'm going to try to stack some miles, and it's very difficult to allocate the time to do it. But as you know, if you've been a subscriber of the channel, if you aren't subscribed, please subscribe, because apparently it really helps. So just hit the subscribe button and the bell notifications, then you'll get notified of the next video, which will be the 250 mile review, and may do a 650 and may do 1,000 kilometers. Sorry, 250 kilometer video, 250, 650, 1,000. Lots of people out there nowadays, because of the bigger batteries, because a lot of people picking these things up, as the unicycles spreads out, people are doing it like Deliveroo type deliveries on them, and they're stacking up loads and loads of miles. So it's kind of like, might just have to not do the videos we used to do, which was unboxing range test, which is a very useful video. So, but maybe the 250 is less useful and the 650 is less useful. 1,000's probably useful, but then for me personally, I have to stick 1,000 kilometers on a wheel, and then the next model needs doing, that's 1,000 kilometers, and don't have that sort of resource and time available to do that. So do the unboxing. I'll just feel my way through it. If I feel a 250 is warranted, yeah. But if nothing comes up and it's the same report, I probably won't bother. I'll probably just do a 500 kilometer and let you know how I got on it, and is there any little tweaks and stuff. The app, before I finish and wrap up this video, the app on this wheel is very sort of in-depth and accomplished. So you can see the status of the cells within these packs. So it's got individual cell monitoring, which is really, really good. So you can see where things are at. If you ever need to diagnose it or anything like that, you can check it out along with their temperatures. You can change all sorts of things through the app. I won't go into all those details. It has got as well the ability to lift it with the motor switched off, which took me a little while, and I had to write to InMotion saying, probably just a quick one, because I didn't read the manual. You press the on-off button twice. It's a little bit picky. You have to time it just right, because one press of the off button is the front light on and off. 2 presses, if you don't press it quick enough, if you press it too quick it won't work. If you press it too slow it won't work. It'll turn the light on and off. And press and hold is powering it off and powering it on. So yeah, it's like press, press, and then the motor goes off and you can lift it up. So that's your lift sensor switch. Typically it's been like a button, a mechanical button either behind, on top, under the trolley handle, etc, etc. So that's that, and that's worked flawlessly. Once you get into the knack of it, it's worked flawlessly. Yeah, screen actually in sun as well has been fine. I didn't find there was too much glare, so you couldn't read the readout. I can see all of that. It shows the battery weirdly. It shows battery percentage and also battery as a bar readout. So it'd be nice to be able to swap that out for something else. So you've got the speed, battery percentage, and then battery bars broken up into sections. It would be quite nice to have, I was thinking when I was riding it along, especially in reference to having the high-speed beep warning with low battery, understanding how much torque you're putting out, so how much of the motor power is being used. I'd rather swap that bottom battery bar out, keep the percentage, swap the battery bar out, have the option to say, well, actually, I want to see what my torque is right now. What percentage of output am I using of this motor? Because it measures it. And so it would be quite nice to say, okay, well, I'm at 80% of its maximum output. And that's kind of adds a bit of a safety into it. So you could look down and go, flip, actually, I'm consuming almost all my motor power. I need to back off a little bit. And that's the same whether you're not going necessarily fast, but you could be going a very steep hill. And this thing will tackle massive hills. I've seen some people, there's some crazy riders out there, and by crazy I mean very skilled, going at some insane stuff, and fair play to you, well done. But this thing can do it. But it'd be nice to be able to monitor that on the bar, as it were, but you can. So there you go. Well, not to my knowledge anyway. Maybe they'll do an over-air update. So these things will update over the air as well. You need the app, the InMotion app. So there we go. Any questions? Let me know in the comments below. Give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Hardly anybody subscribes in relation to the number of views. So the viewers on the channel versus subscribers is very small. So just hit the subscribe button. Also, if you want to get one, go to speedyfeet.co.uk. Take a look at unicycles, new unicycles, and in there you'll find the V14 and the other wheels that we do. Any questions? Let me know. And I will see you on the next one, which is probably 500 kilometres. Unless something goes wrong, then it will be sooner. Oh, my legs. Oh, too painful.